A Note Family Lesson. One day, there was a family called the Notes. There was Mr. Quarter Note,
1,
Mrs. Half Note,
1, 2,
and cute little Whole Note.
1, 2, 3, 4.
One day, the family decided to leave the house to go on a nice long nature walk and spend the weekend camping. When Mr. Quarter Note
1,
finished locking the door, they all walked down the street and set off on their journey. It was such a long walk, and everyone's legs seemed to be getting tired, except little Whole Note.
1, 2, 3, 4.
He was way up ahead and excited as ever. Mrs. Half Note
1, 2,
shouted out to little Whole Note,
1, 2, 3, 4.
"Stay where we can see you! And stay away from the water! You know you're not a strong swimmer!" Little Whole Note
1, 2, 3, 4.
responded, "I'm just looking at my reflection in the water. You know I love to do that. I wouldn't fall in the water anyways. I'm not a baby." Mr. Quarter Note
1,
said, "You heard your mother. Stay away from the water unless I'm nearby." Little Whole Note
1, 2, 3, 4.
thought to himself, "Why do they always treat me like I'm a baby? Don't they know that I always know what I'm doing?" Soon after that, they finally got to the camping grounds where their tents were stored in a shed. It was such a beautiful and peaceful place to spend the weekend. They gathered all their camping equipment and set up their tents. Mr. Quarter Note
1,
and Mrs. Half Note
1, 2,
set up the blue tent while little Whole Note
1, 2, 3, 4.
set up the orange tent. When they were done, they were so tired that they decided to go to sleep early. Mrs. Half Note
1, 2,
shouted to little Whole Note,
1, 2, 3, 4.
"Don't you leave the tent until morning." Little Whole Note
1, 2, 3, 4.
replied, "I won't. Good night." And they all went to sleep. Little Whole Note, however,
1, 2, 3, 4.
decided that he wasn't tired enough to stay in the tent. So he came out and thought up an idea. "I'll go to the river for a while before it gets dark, and no one will ever know." So he set off to the river. When he got there, his reflection in the water was perfect. So he leaned further to get a better look. Before he knew it, he had leaned a bit too far and began to lose his balance. All of a sudden, splash! He fell into the water. He started shouting, "Mom! Dad! Somebody help me!" Little Whole Note
1, 2, 3, 4.
was able to swim a little bit, but the current was pulling him away from the shore, and he started to get frightened. It started to get dark, and there was no one in sight to help him. And just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, it did. It started to rain. The wind started to pick up, and the waves started to push him left and right and up and down. What will he ever do? The next morning, Mr. Quarter Note
1,
and Mrs. Half Note
1, 2,
got up to wake up little Whole Note.
1, 2, 3, 4.
They realized he wasn't there. They got terribly worried. They called out to him with no response to be heard. So Mr. Quarter Note
One.
and Mrs. Half Note
1, 2.
went searching for Little Whole Note.
1, 2, 3, 4.
They searched every trail they could find. They looked in the trees, behind the bushes, behind rocks, everywhere, but couldn't find him. All of a sudden, Mr. Quarter Note
1.
looked across the water and saw the top of a little head. Could it be? Yes, it was. It was Little Whole Note,
1, 2, 3, 4.
sitting on top of a rock in the water. Don't worry, son. I'm coming in to get you. Mr. Quarter Note
1.
went in the water to help his son. He told him to hop on his shoulder while he swam back to shore. Whew, what a relief. Little Whole Note
1, 2, 3, 4.
was safe at last. He told his mommy and daddy that he would never disobey them ever again. He apologized and apologized and apologized so much that his parents had to tell him, Okay, stop apologizing already. In the end, they were all happy to be together again, and they started off back to their tents to enjoy the rest of their weekend with a child who learned a valuable lesson. Always obey your parents.